With so many exotics to choose from, there's always fresh builds to make, with some that are whack and some that are wild. So today, let's talk about Osmiomancy. I really like Stasis' kit for a lot of reasons, but what's really stuck out to me while doing this episode was its versatility. While Stasis as a subclass sort of has one focused goal in mind, being slowing and freezing, your options to achieve that goal are pretty broad, numerous, and fun to experiment with. Whether you want to use your grenades, melees, rifts, turrets, or even weapons to apply those effects, there's so many ways you can make those ends meet, and so many different things you can do once you access them. While I think this is true to a degree of all the subclasses, Stasis does it in a really fun, fluid way, and Warlock's Stasis exotics are a big contributor to that. Rhymecoat does the autonomous freezing through your turret while you hunker down and focus on your guns. Valador's gives you frost armor and a close quarters AoE freeze through Frost Pulse so you can dive into action, and Osmiomancy gives you on-demand targeted freezing through your Cold Snap grenades so you can stay mobile. Each build is mostly focused on freezing enemies, but they all give you completely different tools and playstyle options to do so. This not only widens what Stasis as a subclass has to offer, but it strengthens the identities of each of those exotics as they all offer unique approaches without stepping on each other's toes. Going into my time with Osmio, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, as prior to Rhymecoat coming out, I always used Osmio for double Bleakwatcher turrets. I thought I would just see it as a less interesting option to Rhymecoat as a result, but fortunately those preconceptions were completely wrong, and I ended up being really impressed with what Osmio could offer. So if you're unfamiliar, the way Osmiomancy works is you gain an additional charge of your Cold Snap grenade, and they're improved, both giving them additional travel distance and granting you energy back when the Seekers freeze targets. The energy return is not affected by the grenade stat and is instead affected by the rank and tier of the enemies you freeze. As you can see here in example, Scions would give me about a fifth to a quarter, Acolytes were about a third, and Yellow Bar Knights were giving me about half. Cold Snap grenades chain to 3 targets at max, meaning in most situations your grenade will be almost, if not completely refunded each time you throw it. With the second charge as a backup, Osmio pretty much operates with 100% uptime on cold snaps, and paired alongside ice flare bolts, it can spread an enormous amount of freeze pretty quickly. While this does come at the cost of having to actually throw out the freeze every time you need it, I think there's a great rhythm to Osmiomancy that makes it feel a lot less awkward to use than it first appears, especially when paired with the right weapons. By either using auto-loading rotations or more suitably Demolitionist, you can time your grenades to skip your reloads and put out as much damage as possible. Hands down, one of the best weapon pairings for Osmio, however, is Icebreaker, which not only hits like a truck, but can take advantage of the constant output of freeze to cause a load of ignitions and generate a bunch of ammo for itself. Icebreaker's Catalyst refunds shots when you shatter a frozen enemy with it, which does have a small internal cooldown, but alongside the standard ammo generation system as well as Icebreaker's perk to generate ammo, it's really easy to stay stocked up. With the damage from shatters as well as the ignitions from Icebreaker, you get fantastic crowd control and crowd clearing potential that also does really solid single target damage. Icebreaker perfectly synergizes with this build, and if you've got it in your arsenal, I highly recommend giving this combo a spin. Alongside Icebreaker, running an auto-loading Submersion and a Demolitionist primary, I never had to reload any of my weapons, while also rarely ever running out of ammo on the heavy hitters. If I threw out a grenade and didn't get the full refund, I could empty my primary's magazine, generate the rest of the grenade through demo, throw a Cold Snap to reload it, and swap the Icebreaker to start the fireworks. These synergies establish a really fantastic, fun relationship between your Cold Snap grenades and your weapons that has honestly really blown me away. While it's not particularly revolutionary that Osmio gives you high ability output, it is unique that it does so as a form of utility as opposed to a form of damage. There are of course other abilities and exotics that fall into the utility category, but in my opinion this is one of the coolest and most fun examples I can think of. So to give you the specifics on the build, since causing as much freeze as possible is the name of the game, I went with Ice Flare Bolts as my first aspect to chain additional freeze to enemies. With Osmiomancy freezing 3 enemies on its own, you can immediately start 3 separate chains of Ice Flare Bolts with every grenade, turning an entire battlefield to ice with a few well-timed shatters. To pair alongside it, I went with Glacial Harvest as my second aspect, so every one of those frozen enemies would spawn Stasis Shards, which I could pick up to get stacks of Frost Armor for the damage resistance, as well as to use as my main source of of healing. While each shard only gives you a small amount of health, but the amount of enemies Osmio can freeze, as well as how fast and consistently it can do so, even in solo ultimate content, I was able to use it as my primary source of healing and survivability, with a healing rift as a backup. For fragments, I went with Whisper of Fissures to increase the size and damage of the burst when I shattered frozen targets with Icebreaker, as well as Whisper of Rending to deal increased damage to frozen enemies with my primary. I also went with Whisper of Rime to increase my frost armor stacks up to 8 for the extra damage resistance, as well as Whisper of Bonds to generate orbs from defeating frozen targets. While you could swap out Bonds for something like Whisper of Refraction for more class energy, or Whisper of Shards if you're using a weapon with Headstone, I found the extra orbs from Bonds to be really nice to keep my armor charges rolling. As I mentioned for my weapons, I think using a demo primary is a fantastic choice, as you can not only skip their reloads, but generate extra grenade energy in the rare moments where Osmio doesn't fully refund itself. I was really enjoying pairing it with the damage perk, which I tried out on a Judgment with Paracausal Affinity, M17 with Master of Arms, and even something like Binary Orbit on Intercalary. I also gave Headstone a spin with Cooling Baubles on B7, which was also great, but considering how often I was freezing and shattering enemies themselves, I didn't feel the crystals were necessary, and I preferred the damage perks. For my armor set, I went with Shrewd Survivor, so anytime I swapped off of Icebreaker to my primary, I'd be able to activate Hotshot to not only get some improvements to any heat weapon, SMG, or hand cannon, but also to boost my weapon stat. For armor mods, I don't think there's anything specifically important, so just focus on using any fonts you need to get your stats where you want them. Although Osmio doesn't scale with the grenade stat, Demolitionist does, so I still decided to land my grenades at 100 so I could max out its regeneration. After that, I got my weapons as close to 200 so I could buff up Icebreaker, as well as getting my class to 100 so I'd have a rift as often as possible. Similarly, there isn't anything in the artifact mod this season that synergizes with Stasis, but there are a few great choices for snipers, so I'd take everything you can. Anti-barrier is great for Icebreaker as they pop immediately with a headshot, and Fastest Draw gives you some extra flinch resistance if you land one after you swap. I was using Reload at range for Submersion in case I needed to put out multiple quick shots, but it isn't necessary as Icebreaker doesn't reload and can't take advantage of it. Finally, Sniper's Meditation is fantastic as it increases sniper damage on each precision hit up to a maximum of 15%. As I mentioned at the top, I think Osmiomancy is a great exotic that proves to me exactly why Stasis is such a unique and interesting subclass to build around. The versatility it provides, from the range you can engage at to how you apply your freeze, is incredible, and paired alongside the right weapons, it achieves a sense of flow that, to me, is the hallmark of what makes Destiny so special. I can't recommend Osmiomancy or this build enough, and it stands as one of my favorites of the series. I'm pleased to have been surprised by exactly what Osmio was capable of, and more than happy to be able to give it its flowers. To me, Osmiomancy is unique, interesting, an absolute blast, and by all accounts, wild. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. There's a dim link down below if you want to give my exact build a try, or if you want to use it as the base for your own spin on it. Subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for more videos soon, and let me know in the comments what you think of Osmiomancy.